This is the Network Journal Report. I'm Gary Anthony Ramsey, bringing you business stories that affect your world for the week ending November 13, 2010. Our top stories include a controversial proposal, 3, 2, and 1. A controversial proposal to cut the deficit draws fire from both sides of the political world. The president's trip to Asia yields little political or economic results. The Postal Service could go broke by the end of next year. Somali pirates continue to drive up the cost of shipping. Tyler Perry's Colored Girls gets cheers and jeers, and NBC's more colorful fall lineup sees a casualty. Our top story. A bipartisan commission put together by the president makes dramatic recommendations for cutting the deficit. The panel's suggestions are so stark, they're drawing criticism from Democrats and Republicans alike. The commission, headed by former Clinton White House Chief of Staff Erskine Bowles and retired Republican Wyoming Senator Alan Simpson, made several suggestions for eliminating the nation's $1.3 trillion deficit, including raising the Social Security retirement age to 69 while reducing scheduled benefit increases, slashing the Pentagon's budget by $100 billion, cutting farm subsidies, eliminating earmarks, eliminating child tax credits, the mortgage interest deduction, and the earned income tax credit, and increasing the federal tax on gasoline by 15 cents per gallon. Current Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, quote, "This proposal is simply unacceptable. Any final proposal from the Commission should do what is right for our children and grandchildren's economic security as well as for our nation's fiscal security, and it must do what is right for our seniors who are counting on the bedrock promises of Social Security and Medicare." Republicans have largely rejected any notion of raising taxes of any kind, but have been cautious about commenting on the list of recommendations. The president, while at the G20 summit in South Korea, suggested that lawmakers keep an open mind.
Before anybody starts shooting down proposals, I think we need to listen. We need to gather up all the facts. I think we have to be straight with the American people. If people are in fact concerned about spending, debt, deficits, and the future of our country, then they're going to need to be armed with the information about the kinds of choices that are going to be involved.
While the recommendations from the panel are just that, recommendations, ultimately it will be up to both houses of Congress and the president to decide if and when they'll move forward on any of those suggestions. Well, as we mentioned, the president was at the G20 summit in South Korea when that report came in. It was part of his 2-week trip through Asia to strengthen political and economic ties. But Barack Obama was unable to lock down a trade agreement that would have opened the Korean markets to U.S. beef and auto products. The current accord has been in place since 2004. With $69 billion in trade between the two nations alone, the deal would have allowed the president to fulfill a promise of doubling U.S. exports. Obama and Korean President Lee Myung-bak said they would seek to resolve any differences in the coming weeks. Well, back here in the U.S., it seems that differences will unlikely be resolved in just a few weeks as battles begin to brew among Democratic lawmakers for the minority leadership positions in the House. Outgoing Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she will again run for the #1 spot in the Democratic minority, to the surprise and chagrin of some. But the battle to watch will be for the job of Minority Whip. That will pit current House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer against Representative James Clyburn. Clyburn has received the endorsement of the Congressional Black Caucus, which has said the Democratic leadership needs more diversity. Well, the other big battle brewing on Capitol Hill could affect your tax refund, if you get a refund at all, as now Congress has to deal with those expiring Bush tax cuts. Question now, after the election, is whether the White House will cave or compromise on continuing the tax cuts for the wealthy. Chief of Staff David Axelrod was playing a statement tennis match this week. After at first it seemed he indicated that the president would fold on the issue, he later said it wasn't the case. Republicans, in the wake of their big win, have insisted they don't want the rate to go up on anyone, even the wealthy, which they are now describing as small business in their talking points. The cash-strapped U.S. Postal Service delivers some bad news, saying that it lost $8.5 billion in the fiscal year that just ended in September. Without congressional action to change its obligations, the Postal Service would likely go broke by the end of fiscal year 2011. Letter carriers delivered 170.6 billion pieces of mail in 2010, a drop of 6 billion pieces from the previous year. The Postal Service also announced that it plans to deplete its $15 billion line of credit with the U.S. Treasury by borrowing the remaining $3.5 billion that's available. Though the Postal Service does not use taxpayer funding, it has tapped the credit line since the early 1990s. Depleting it means the Postal Service would likely go broke by the end of fiscal 2011 unless Congress takes action. General Motors posts a $2 billion profit in its third quarter, just ahead of its initial public offering as it emerges from government ownership. But if you think you'd like to get a piece of the newer, leaner, meaner Detroit automaking giant, you've got your work cut out for you. Despite 35 underwriters and at least 365 million shares, there isn't enough to distribute to online brokers that cater to small retail investors. The exclusion of the more public investing firms in this IPO is drawing interest since the company received more than $50 billion in bailout funds from taxpayers, just $7 billion of which has been returned. It all takes place just 17 months after the company declared bankruptcy in June of 2009. The pirates hijacked a Panamanian chemical tanker some 900 miles off the coast of Africa in waters closer to India than to Somalia. The European Union Naval Force says the Hannibal II was boarded while carrying vegetable oil from Malaysia towards the Suez Canal. The ship has a crew of 31. This happens as an international commission was convened to deal with the issue. 2010 recorded the highest number of ship hijackings in 5 years, currently standing at 128 boardings so far. In entertainment news, Tyler Perry's film adaptation of the award-winning play For Color Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Was Enough hits theaters to a mix of reviews. The film, which tells the story of African-American women who are struggling with a number of issues, opened in the number 3 spot, bringing in more than $20 million in its first week. Some reviews have described the work as brilliant and thought-provoking, while others have labeled it man-bashing and formula. Colored Girls stars Whoopi Goldberg, Janet Jackson, Kimberly Elise, and Thandie Newton. And finally, the more colorful season of NBC's fall lineup has seen a casualty of the ratings war. Undercovers was a dramatic comedy series about 2 black former covert operations agents who were pressed back into service. It starred Boris Kujo and Guju Mbatha Raw as the Blooms. The show also touted J.J. Abrams of Lost fame as executive producer, but in the end it wasn't enough. Though its first episode was critically acclaimed, the show has since struggled with ratings and high production costs. The last show delivered only 5.8 million viewers. For a complete look at business stories that affect your world, subscribe to the Network Journal. You can always feel free to check us out here at tnj.com. And for a more complete look at national and international stories affecting your world, go to ournewsnow.com. That's the Network Journal Report. I'm Gary Anthony Randall.